Welcome to the Aftermarket Parts Invoicing Focus Group tutorial. My name is Kathleen Mead, and I'm going to provide you with a quick overview of the invoicing and payment history and process. In 2018 and 2019, the legislature provided CARB with new authority to assess fees for certification and compliance activities for non-on-road products such as lawnmowers, aftermarket parts, off-road equipment, and evaporative components. Also, the legislature lifted the cap from the existing fee structure assessed on on-road cars, trucks, and motorcycles. Starting in 2019, CARB staff worked with the affected manufacturers to create a fee structure which would be adopted by our board in April 2021. The new fee structure requires an upfront fee at the time of product application. There are 35 different categories organized into 6 different focus groups. This tutorial focuses on one of those groups. To read the regulations, please go to the webpage shown here. The regulation was adopted by the Office of Administrative Law on January 18th of this year and will go into effect on April 1st. All applications received on April 1st and later will require the correct upfront fee prior to CARB staff evaluating the product application. The fee payment process is a 4-step process: obtaining a fiscal account, creating and finalizing your invoice, making the payment, and submittal of payment documents with your application. On March 8th, I provided a workshop that walked through the details of steps 1, 3, and 4 seen on this slide. This focus tutorial will provide more details on your focus group requirements, such as defining each category type and fee type contained in your focus group, creating the draft invoice, and contact information specific for your categories. For more information on the complete process, please review the March 8th workshop and go to our webpage shown on this slide. So step 2, the invoicing process. As previously stated, this tutorial focuses on how to create a draft invoice required for the invoicing process. The details of the step-by-step process for invoicing are outlined in the March 8th workshop and provided on our webpage. For a quick review, the overall invoicing process has 3 steps. First, the manufacturer, or you, go to our website. You select the correct draft invoice for your group, and you create a draft invoice. Second, you email the draft invoice to MS CertFees, ensuring that you follow the instructions listed on the slide. Lastly, CARB staff will create and email back a final invoice that you will use for step 3 and 4 of the invoicing and payment process. Again, please review the March 8th workshop and visit our webpage for the detailed instructions. Now I will hand the reins over to your focus group specialist to provide you with the information you need to fill out your draft invoice.
Hello, I'm Trina with Aftermarket Parts, and I will be leading this focus tutorial to demonstrate how to create a draft invoice for the Aftermarket Parts exemption group. To begin, go to the Mobile Source Certification and Compliance Fee Regulation Meetings and Workshops page of the CARB website. Navigate to the Mobile Source Fee Implementation Resources section and select the Aftermarket Draft Invoice form. This is what the Aftermarket Parts draft invoice looks like. I will be reviewing the company information needed and the application information available for selection in the next few slides. This is the top section of the form where you'll be inputting company information such as company name, address, etc. The fields for invoice number and invoice date, which are outlined here in red, are reserved for CARB's use only, so please leave them blank. The final field asks for your Fiscal account number, which is supplied to you by CARB. Fiscal is a state accounting system. The parent company name, address, and payment contact may be different in the Fiscal account than the application contact. Please review the March 8th workshop or visit our website to obtain more information on getting your Fiscal account. Your point of contact regarding the Fiscal account will be your assigned aftermarket parts staff listed on the final slide of this presentation. This is what the application section of the form looks like. Here you will provide information for each application you are submitting and paying for. As you can see, for each payment row, there are columns for the product description, calendar year, unique application identifier, category type, fee type, and amount. We will cover the process of filling out the information in these columns in the next few slides. Multiple applications within the aftermarket parts exemption group can be listed in one invoice. Please note that for aftermarket catalytic converters, each row represents a vehicle application list that will be submitted to CARB. This list identifies the intended vehicle coverage for the catalytic converter according to the procedures referenced here. For product description, our suggested descriptors are listed here in order. The image illustrates an example of what that may look like. Here, the device name is the PTU intercooler kit, the vehicle model year coverage is 2012 to 2020, the make and models are Honda Accords and Honda Civics, the engine aspiration is natural aspiration, the fuel type is gasoline, the weight class is passenger cars, and the category information is Category 5. The website that details category information is referenced here. On the next column, the calendar year is the year in which the application will be submitted. In our example, this is 2022. The following column is for the unique application identifier. Each manufacturer, whether new or in possession of existing executive orders, will need to generate a unique application identifier. The format, as shown here, is WXXYZZ. W is the EO code to determine the type of exemption executive order being requested, whether that's B, C, D, or K. XXX will depend on whether the manufacturer has existing executive orders or not. If a manufacturer has existing executive orders, they will use the manufacturer code that they've been assigned according to which executive order series they're applying for. The same manufacturer might have the code 123 for D series and 456 for K series. It's important to use the correct code. If a manufacturer is new, then XXX is a 3-letter abbreviation of the company name. Y represents the calendar year designation for the year of submittal. For our purposes, N equals 2022. When Y changes to the next year, in other words, when a manufacturer is submitting an application in 2023, P will then be used to represent 2023 and so forth. ZZ represents the sequential number of your application for the calendar year depending on which executive order series you choose. It's a 2-digit number that restarts to 01 when a new year begins. We will be providing examples in the next couple of slides to clarify these steps. This slide illustrates a specific example for a manufacturer with existing executive orders submitting their first invoice. Here, the unique application identifier is D310N24, where D is the EO code for a D series exemption, 310 is this manufacturer's code for D series executive orders, N is for 2022, and 24 means that this is the 24th overall D series application the manufacturer is submitting to aftermarket parts since January 1st, 2022. Therefore, 23 D series applications were submitted to aftermarket parts prior to this invoice. This slide illustrates a specific example for a new manufacturer submitting their first invoice. Here, the unique application identifier is KPTU-N01, where K is the EO code for a K-series exemption, PTU is an abbreviation of the company name, N is for 2022, and 01 means that this is the first application that the new manufacturer is submitting. Next, the category type column has a drop-down menu that allows you to select the suitable category type for each application. Each category type has a set of applicable fee types. The definitions of each category type and fee type can be found in the Title 13 sections referenced here. We will get a better view of the category types in the next slide. Within aftermarket parts, there are 8 category types. These category types are aftermarket catalytic converter, aftermarket diesel particulate filter, aftermarket fuel tank, aftermarket part general, alternative fuel retrofit system, alternative fuel retrofit system extension, experimental permit, and motorcycle critical emission control part. Each of these category types and their associated fee types will be covered in the next few slides. If your application is for an aftermarket catalytic converter, then on the invoice form, open the category type drop-down menu and select aftermarket catalytic converter as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. We will cover each of these fee types in the next few slides. The aftermarket catalytic converter category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. The 3 applicable fee types are base, small business, and aftermarket catalytic converter reduced cost application. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. I will cover each fee type in the following slides. The base fee type is for applications that don't qualify for reduced cost fees, which are listed here. The small business fee type is defined in the California Government Code section referenced here. A business entity is independently owned and operated if ownership interests, management, and operation are not subject to control, restriction, modification, or limitation by an outside source, individual, or another business entity. An applicant business is not independently owned and operated if evidence exists of either of the following. An outside person or business concern owns or controls or has the power to control 50% or more of the voting stock, or one or more business owners, general partners, directors, officers, or members of an outside business concern controls or has the power to control or influence the day-to-day operations of the applicant business, board of directors, and/or owners. How do I know I'm a small business? Your company is a small business if it is independently owned and operated, not dominant, and has fewer than 100 employees. Manufacturers will need to provide information to aftermarket parts to prove that they are a small business. The aftermarket catalytic converter reduced cost application fee type is for vehicle application lists that are identical in model year, range, and emission category to the previous application that resulted in a catalytic converter executive order, but change one or more of the items listed here. If your application is for an aftermarket diesel particulate filter, then on the invoice form, open the category type drop-down menu and select aftermarket diesel particulate filter as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The aftermarket diesel particulate filter category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. The 2 applicable fee types are base and small business. These fee types were covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base and slides 20 to 22 for small business. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. If your application is for a general aftermarket part, then on the invoice form, open the category type drop-down menu and select aftermarket part general as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The aftermarket part general category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. The 3 applicable fee types are base, small business, and Category 1 or Category 8. The base and small business fee types were covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base and slides 20 to 22 for small business. We will cover Category 1 or Category 8 in the next few slides. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. The definitions for Category 1 and Category 8 are listed in the procedures referenced here. How do I know my application is a Category 1? If your device was previously issued an executive order and your application is only requesting one of the actions listed here, then your application is a Category 1. How do I know my application is a Category 8? If your device is on the Category 8 list of devices in the procedures referenced here, then your application is a Category 8. Some examples are air filter rams, ignition coils, and torque converters. If your application is for an aftermarket fuel tank, then on the invoice form, open the Category Type drop-down menu and select Aftermarket Fuel Tank as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The aftermarket fuel tank category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. The three applicable fee types are base, small business, and Category 1. These fee types were covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base, slides 20 to 22 for small business, and slides 28 to 29 for Category 1. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. If your application is for an alternative fuel retrofit system, then on the invoice form, open the Category Type drop-down menu and select Alternative Fuel Retrofit System as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The Alternative Fuel Retrofit System category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. These applications are designed to convert a motor vehicle to use a fuel different from the certification fuel, a motor vehicle for emission reduction credit, and a hybrid electric vehicle to an off-vehicle charge-capable hybrid electric vehicle. The three applicable fee types are base, small business, and zero emission. The base and small business fee types were covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base and slides 20 to 22 for small business. We will cover zero emission in the next slide. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. The zero-emission fee type is for mobile source technologies that do not inherently produce any criteria or precursor pollutants or greenhouse gas. This excludes emissions from air conditioning systems. If your application is for an alternative fuel retrofit system extension, then on the invoice form, open the Category Type drop-down menu and select Alternative Fuel Retrofit System Extension as illustrated here. Please submit applications that meet the Alternative Fuel Retrofit System Extension category type to the applicable new vehicle certification section. The Alternative Fuel Retrofit System Extension category type is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. Those that are submitted within 30 days of the issuance of the new vehicle or engine certification will not require a certification fee payment. You do not have to submit an aftermarket parts exemption group invoice if you are solely doing an alternative fuel retrofit system extension and it is within 30 days of the issuance of the new vehicle or engine executive order. If after the 30-day time period, the alternative fuel retrofit system application will have to be submitted to pay a fee. If your application is for an experimental permit, then on the invoice form, open the Category Type drop-down menu and select Experimental Permit as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The experimental permit category type is for the testing of experimental motor vehicle pollution control devices in used motor vehicles, and experimental or prototype motor vehicles appearing to have very low emission characteristics in accordance with the Health and Safety Code referenced here. The single applicable fee type is base. This fee type was covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. If your application is for a motorcycle critical emission control part, then on the invoice form, open the Category Type drop-down menu and select Motorcycle Critical Emission Control Part as illustrated here. After selecting the category type, you can then open the fee type drop-down menu to see which fee types are applicable. The Motorcycle Critical Emission Control Part category type is for any aftermarket critical emission control part for use on highway motorcycles in California and is subject to the Title 13 requirements referenced here. The three applicable fee types are base, small business, and carryover. The base and small business fee types were covered previously, so please refer to slide 19 for base and slides 20 to 22 for small business. We will cover carryover in the next slide. Make sure to select the correct fee type that suits your application, otherwise there will be delays in processing. The amount cell of the invoice form autofills once you've made your selection. The carryover fee type is for applications that are identical to the previous model year's application that resulted in an exemption executive order, but change one or more of the items listed here. As mentioned in the March 8th workshop, after filling out all the information on the invoice form except for the invoice number and invoice date, you will then sign the attestation at the bottom of the form. Save this draft invoice for your records and email it to mscertfees@arb.ca.gov. Remember to title the email MSF New Invoice Request with AMP in the parentheses as instructed in the March 8th workshop. If your draft invoice is deemed complete by CARB staff, an invoice number and invoice date will be incorporated into the form, turning your draft invoice into a final invoice. CARB staff will then email this final invoice back to you within 1 to 2 business days. Please wait 5 business days after receiving your final invoice before submitting a payment to allow for processing of your invoice information. If you pay too soon, the payment may get lost from your invoice and cause delays in processing your applications. Make your payment on the website referenced here. After making your payment, email the assigned aftermarket parts staff with the invoice number you received on the final invoice and the payment amount. For more details on the payment process, please review the March 8th workshop. Once the payment is received, review of your application may begin. You will receive an email from staff stating that your application status is now accepted for filing. It's important to choose the correct fee type for each application and pay the correct amount. Otherwise, there will be delays in processing. Submit each application listed on your invoice form separately, attaching the final invoice to each separate email. For instance, if your invoice has 7 applications listed, you will send 7 separate emails for each application to ampes@arb.ca.gov and attach the final invoice to each of the 7 emails. Title the subject line of each email with your company name and the corresponding unique application identifier you generated. Refer to slides 12 to 14 for instructions on the unique application identifier. This concludes our focus tutorial. For more information, contact me, your assigned aftermarket parts staff, at trina.pendon@arb.ca.gov. You can also visit our website, or you can email mscertfees@arb.ca.gov. If you do so, please include the nature of your inquiry in the header and AMP in parentheses. Thanks for watching and have a great day.